So on this channel, you're probably familiar with a series that we have done in the past looking at how to build a watch collection for a specific budget. And in this video, we have a really solid budget to look at, a number that I've been waiting to get to, and that is $10,000. So if you're not familiar with these videos, what we do is we have different personas and just go through different ways in which you can build a collection based on that buying philosophy and how you want to navigate your collecting journey. So we'll go through those personas. Before we begin here, I do want to mention if you want to look for maximizing your budget for $10,000, we have a write-up article, comprehensive list of some of the best watches under $10,000. I'll link to that down below. For the first category, we're going to really talk about this idea, but we can't cover everything, so I certainly would recommend checking that out. So quickly, let's go through our different buying personas for those that are not familiar, and then we'll jump into the actual list of watches themselves. So to begin here, we have persona number one. This is the one watch collection. So this is the type of person that tries their best to find one watch that can meet all their needs and finds joy in the simplicity of reaching for the same watch every single day. Persona 2 is check off the boxes. This type of collector needs to have a watch for every scenario, even if one of those scenarios never happens. Persona 3, we have the hipster. This type of collector can't stand having anything mainstream, so they spend the majority of their time picking out boutique watches and micro brands. Persona 4, sports or nothing. This collector doesn't give a damn about your dress watch and only wants casual sporty looks and capable specs for an active lifestyle. Persona 5, we have the perfect duo. This collector likes simplicity but could never settle with just one watch. So they opt for the balance of a dress and sports everyday piece. And finally, we have Persona 6. This is the 3-watch collection. This collector likes having 3 perfect watches to cover all their bases, one dress, one everyday, and one sport watch. So to begin, we have the one watch collection. I think there are a variety of different watches you can include here. I would look at some divers to start. There's a trio of divers that come to mind. One of obviously is going to be the Rolex Submariner, the Rolex Submariner Date. This one goes right over $10,000, but it's right on the money. I know the obvious thing to mention here is that, can you get it for that price? But I do think if you can get a Submariner at retail, absolutely a no-brainer, do-it-all watch for $10,000 without question. A couple other dive watches that come to mind immediately are the Blancpain Bathyscaphe. This watch is available in a wide variety of sizes, including a 38mm case, which I think will be interesting for those with smaller wrists. Very capable in the water resistance department with 300 meters of water resistance. Also really solid in the thickness department as well. And like its intended purpose was made to be that do-it-all type of dive watch. As consumer diving became more of the norm in the mid-20th century, this was that answer to go alongside the original 50 Fathoms for those that are more to the professional side of things. And then for the final dive watch for this category is going to be the Glashütte Original CQ. 200 meters of water resistance, 39.5mm case. It pretty much perfectly mirrors the Tudor Black Bay 58 in its wearing experience. And one of the most beautiful movements on the inside, you have the 3911. This unfortunately is not available when you flip this watch around. You have to go for the Pano Date versions to get that box sapphire case back along with the crystal on the front, which is a pretty cool combination. But even with that being the case, you will know, as well as your watchmaker will know, that this is a simply beautiful movement. A couple different options here that I'll also throw into the mix for around $10,000. Zenith Chronomaster Rate Do-It-All chronograph. Why I really like that watch, you're talking about a 38mm case with that A386 case style. And then you also are getting that 3600 El Primero caliber on the inside, 1/10 of a second tracking, but also being an automatic caliber, typically when you're talking about chronographs, usually going to be very thick, but this is allowing this watch to still be under 13mm in thickness, probably one of the most wearable automatic chronographs in the price segment. Typically to get this level of thickness, you have to go for a manual wound, so complete joy to wear on the wrist, and probably going to be unique in both its case shape, but also its ability to wear compact and slide underneath the dress cuff for an automatic chrono. And then one final do-it-all watch, and this probably could be the most complete watch for $10,000, and that is going to be the Cartier Santos de Cartier, the S&G model. So this is one of the very few instances where I actually like the two-tone version more than the stainless steel option. The reason being just because I think it looks spectacular with the gold screws, the combination of gold accents throughout that steel case. The Santos just looks at home with two-tone. And in terms of the size options, you have a large version and a medium version. For those on the smaller wrist size, spectrum, I would recommend going for the medium size. This is also a great maybe watch to share with that significant other in your life. 35.1 millimeter case, 41.9 millimeter on that lug-to-lug end. If you do measure it out to that extent, then you're getting 100 meters of water resistance. So it still is sporty enough. Of course, now leaning into more dressy style, being the affiliation with Cartier and what usually is going to be attributed to the brand. This still is able to kind of walk that fine line as kind of a more dress-oriented sports watch or everyday style watch. And then inside you have the automatic MC 1847. For our next category, we have the check off the boxes individual. So there's a couple subcategories underneath this persona. The first one is going to be the everyday category. Now for my everyday option, I have the Tudor Ranger. So this, when released a few months back, I think had some pretty mixed reviews. People weren't sure what to think of it. Some said it was boring. I mean, it is a field watch after all. So I don't know if going for this really eccentric type of approach is the right lane for Tudor. I think all in all, if you're talking about a do-it-all everyday watch, somebody's gonna try to check off the boxes, I think this is where this watch makes the most sense. 39 millimeter case, so moving from that 41 millimeter case from the Tudor of prior years when it was unveiled in 2014. I think this is probably a better middle ground for most wrists out there, and then also filling the void of the now removed 39 millimeter Explorer from Rolex, 11 millimeter in thickness, 47.7 millimeter lug-to-lug distance, and then the big news here is going to be the inclusion of an MT caliber on the inside, so 70-hour power reserve, COSC certification, and then coming in at a price range under $3,000 starting on a strap. So that is pretty well positioned, pretty much the most attainable MT movement powered Tudor watch that you're gonna find, and I think a good option for that everyday category for the check off the boxes persona. So when people think of JLC, I think they commonly will associate fine watchmaking with the brand, as they should. But one thing that I don't think people fully understand at times is how relatively attainable you can get into some of their entry-level pieces. Now, relatively speaking, and this is a brand that has everything from, you know, Reverso up to some gyro tourbillons. They're a brand with great depth in their watchmaking. But when you could talk about getting a JLC for $4,000 or $4,500, I mean, I don't know many people consider this reality. Now, for a little bit more, you can go into the mechanical versions of the Reverso, but if you're trying to get into the brand at the most attainable level, you can go into it with the JLC Reverso Classic Monophase. This is the quartz-powered version. It is going to be a little bit smaller as well. So from a circular case equivalent, you're probably looking closer to around a 35 to 36 millimeter case if you had to make that adjustment to a circular equivalent. Quartz movement on the inside, but why I'm giving this one the pass is because it's such a irreplaceable watch. It has no alternative. I think, of course, you can mention the Cartier tank, but to get that chassis system where you can flip the watch around, it's just unmatched in terms of its approach. Also, considering that this one does not have a second hand, I think you can get away with having a quartz one and also maximizing your budget here for $10,000. So with the majority of our budget going to the everyday and dress category, it leaves me less for complication, but thankfully, we here have the Tissot Telemeter 1938. So the new vintage-inspired chronograph from Tissot. This was recently unveiled in the summertime, should be coming available around this time. Not a definitive word, but there could be availability of this by the time of actually releasing this video, so we will see. A lot of interest in this one. 42 millimeter case, a little bit on the larger end, thickness at 13.85 millimeters, and you're getting a Valjoux movement on the inside. And this is coming under $2,000. Tissot has basically just jumped into the mix with Hamilton and offering up some great new looks to their chronograph line. And I think these are some of the most intriguing looking chronographs from the brand. And now with this and the PRX Chrono being available under $2,000 from the brand, they are pretty much now setting a new standard for what that entry-level Swiss-made chronograph should be and should look like. I think you're getting two interesting approaches. One going to more the sporty side, this one, of course, appealing to that classic telemeter of the 1930s, and pretty interesting layout as well that is just so Tissot. So now for our final watch here, we're looking at our beater, and here we have the G-Shock GMB 2100, the full metal G-Shock with the bracelet. So these were absolutely hyped when they were unveiled. I think for a long time, people were very much in the modding community, adding these bracelets on these metal G-Shocks. This is probably extending out the price a bit more than what, of course, people in the modding community are going to maybe be comfortable with. But for those who just want, hey, I want a G-Shock, I want it to be full metal bracelet, everything, and it done well, and are willing to pay a little bit more to get that peace of mind and ease of just being able to slap it on the wrist after buying one, I think these are an absolute hit. When we posted about these on Instagram, people were starting to go crazy. These sold out pretty much in a few hours, and it's pretty hard to get a hold of them. Seems like everybody's loving these things so far. Going to be a little bit larger from a case size standpoint, but still wears, I'd say, around a 42 millimeter in terms of actuality. So 44.4 millimeters in the case size, lug to lug of 49.8 millimeters. You're getting some Bluetooth functionality that will allow you to set time calendar functions with ease with your smartphone. Some people might not like that, but I think it is helped to kind of set that precise time to an atomic clock. So there is some peace of mind there. And available in 3 different shades. You have this true steel option, this more darkened steel option, and then you have that rose plated version as well if you want something a bit more striking. Now for our next category, we have the Hipster. So the Hipster, they want to go against the grain a little bit, you know, kind of challenge that status quo. What are the typical watches here? So a few different categories. Let's start with our diver tool watch that will round out that side of our collection. And here I have the Zodiac Super Seawolf Pro Diver. So this is the new Pro Diver from Zodiac that is going to have all the charm that comes with the traditional Seawolf, at least since it's been brought back to life by the Fossil Group, and then being infused with some pro specifications. If you know the history of the Zodiac Seawolf, you know that in 1953 this watch was unveiled, same year as the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Rolex Submariner, so it's in a class that is, I would say, amongst the pantheon of dive watches in terms of its release that same year, but many of the dive watches that have been unveiled in recent years, not going to be more to that tool approach that the original watches were at the time of their release. These are going to be more like that with their COSC caliber on the inside, and then also getting ISO compliance here as well. Lume is also going to get a nice jump forward. There was a titanium version that was limited edition that also retailed a little bit higher, but those have sold out since. So these are the more baseline stainless steel, but still getting that up specification for not that much more money compared to the traditional base level Seawolf options. For the dress side of things, we have our next watch from Nomos with the Nomos Tangente Neomatic updates. So the cool thing about this watch is going to be the DUW 6101. And what's cool about this movement is how it's going to make that date appear on the dial. So you have this small outer track, this periphery on the dial, where you have these small little apertures that are going to represent one day of the month. And to feature that date, you have an exotic color that's going to fill that aperture up completely at the dial's periphery. On the blue dial version, you have this kind of more neon green. In terms of wearability, this one is gonna be on the larger end. I'd say wears closer to a 42 millimeter watch, all considered, if not a little bit larger. But for those that want some unconventional flair, a movement on the inside that is well finished and can be shown on the flip side with that sapphire case back, this is certainly a looker. And with the remaining budget that we have, I'm going to then look at a GMT watch, so more that sporty approach. We have the Norqain Freedom GMT. So why this watch is, I think, an interesting choice to look at is going to be the movement. So this stirred up some conversation when this happened. So this is one of the few brands that has had access to Kenissi movements. If you're not familiar with Kenissi, it's the shared movement manufacturing arm of Tudor. Chanel also, I believe, has partial ownership, but many of Tudor's MT calibers being produced by Kenissi that they have ownership stake in. Norqain is one of the first to benefit from the third-party availability of some of Kenissi's movements. I don't know what their total rollout plan is for more production and making it available to other brands, but this is certainly an interesting case study to see how this continues. So this is getting a COSC certified movement, 70-hour power reserve on the inside. This is also a true GMT. It is coming at a higher price range of $4,000, but if you're somebody that wants something different than the typical brands that occupy this price range and still want a premium product, I think this is where this one starts to make some more sense. If you're a hipster category, I think this is a nice marriage. For Persona 4, we have the sports or nothing category. So this is going to be looking at a few different styles of sports watches. The first one, going to look at a GMT. This was one that came to mind looking at the Tudor Black Bay GMT with the new S&G model. This model basically emulates much of what happened from the previous 2018 release of the Black Bay GMT and infuses some of the S&G DNA that was very much the theme for Tudor this year at Watches and Wonders. I would say this, along with the Black Bay Pro, got the most buzz during their new releases of this year. Pretty much going to wear identical to the previous Black Bay GMT 41mm case, just south of 15mm in thickness, lug to lug of 50mm, MT movement on the inside, 70-hour power reserve as well to go along with it. You are seeing a price increase with this one, given that it is going to have some gold infused within that case. But for those that like this two-tone style in the GMT format, I think it's still well positioned, relatively speaking, for a true GMT in the luxury segment at this entry door. For the other pillar, we have to have a dive watch. I think the Oris Aquis is obvious when it comes to trying to think of spreading out this budget, but I wanted to differentiate the dial. I wanted something a little bit different here, and for that we have the new New York Harbor limited edition from Oris. So this is coming in at a 41.5mm case, going to wear closer to a 40mm watch, considering that integrated style with that bracelet and case end. Thickness of 12.7mm, lug to lug of 48mm, 300 meters of water resistance. These are the Sellita powered versions. Probably one of the most premium of prices that you're gonna find for these Sellita powered models. You're not talking about much more to start getting into the caliber 400 here. So that is one of the challenges, but really, why is this having an upcharge? I have a full review on this one, talking about more about the initiative that this one aligns with and the cause that this one aligns with, helping to create new oyster reefs in the New York Harbor. And to round out our budget here, we have our chronograph, and I'm gonna look at a newer release from Hamilton with the Hamilton Pilot Pioneer Mechanical Chronograph, or the PPMC, which I'll call it. So this is essentially a military option and an extension from the khaki family, and infusing what many people will associate with Hamilton at that $2,000 price range with their really solidly positioned chronographs. Many people think of the Chrono H, the Intramatics. This is gonna really align directly with that in terms of price and positioning. 40mm case, 14.35mm on the thickness, lug to lug of 49.8mm. This is going to wear slightly larger than that of those previously mentioned options, like the Chrono H and the Intramatic chronographs. Still getting 100 meters of water resistance with a Valjoux caliber on the inside, 60-hour power reserve. This is a 7753 base. It is going to be manual winding, so you're going to remove that oscillating weight to allow it to be slightly thinner, but not much. I wish they could slim this down just a little bit more because it is manual wound, and probably one of the most legible dials that you're gonna find on pretty much any chronograph. Next, we have Persona number 5. So in a nice perfect dichotomy here, we want the sports watch and the dress watch. To start with our sports watch, I'm gonna go with the Omega Speedmaster Professional. Now this might seem like an obvious choice, but yeah, it's an obvious choice. Where are you trying to get that sports pillar under $10,000 while still having enough room for a dress watch? I think Omega is an obvious brand to think of when you're talking about this. And what other, honestly, watch under $10,000 now? We looked at the Submariner now with the Submariner date being over $10,000. What watch is more iconic under $10,000 from a luxury segment standpoint? I think it has to be the Speedmaster. Now with its new bracelets, you're dealing also with the option for the Hezolite versus the Sapphire. For the sake of maximizing our budget here, I am going to go with the Hezolite version because that one retails at $6,400. 42mm case, but is going to wear much smaller than that. I would say Speedmaster wears closer to a 40.5 to 41mm case. Still works well on my wrist. 50 meters of water resistance. And then on the inside, now the big news is going to be the shift into coaxial escapement movements for their chronographs, this one being the 3861 master chronometer, and of course going to have Dr. George Daniels' creation with that coaxial escapement. So now for our dress watch, we have under $3,500 left for that budget. What are the best dress watches for that price? I mean, I think you could go for Nomos and look at something, of course, from Longines, but those are now getting a little bit closer to $2,000. So I wanted to maximize our budget. So what is something around $3,000 to $3,500 that I think is a great dress watch? I would go with the Baume & Mercier Clifton Balmatic. Now, this is a watch that I think is underrated as can be, probably my favorite from the brand. 40mm case, thickness of 10.5mm, and a lug to lug of 46mm. So going to wear very true to that case size of 40mm, if not slightly smaller. But the reason why this watch is special, it has to be the movement. This movement has a 5-day, 120-hour power reserve. It's a movement that's produced in collaboration with Val Fleurier, the movement manufacturing arm for Richemont. Baume & Mercier being a Richemont brand, kind of the entry door into the world of their watchmaking. So this is simply a phenomenal movement. You're talking about a COSC certified extended power reserve that's pretty much class leading along with the caliber 400 to have that long 5-day power reserve and almost setting that standard. And then coming in a price range around $3,000, I mean, it's pretty tough to beat. Optionality also when it comes to dial, my favorite is probably that midnight blue looking dial with almost that gradient type effect to it that like shifts from blue to black depending on where you look at it in different lighting conditions, but really underrated watch. And to round out our list here, we have our final persona, and that is the 3-watch collection. Might be my favorite way of navigating this outside of maybe maximizing your budget, but I think this is a great way of navigating this type of idea of just getting good variety while still getting a good chunk for the dollar amount. Now, to start here, we have our everyday style option, and for me, I wanna go for a newer release from IWC with the Mark 20. I have always been a fan of the different Mark models more than the big pilots, just given that the big pilots are going to be a little large for my wrist. I think these are class leading in terms of just looking the part, also considering IWC's history in pilot watches, it's pretty much unmatched for the most part. Just beautiful, they own this design language. At the time of recording this, there really hasn't been many real photos of this watch, so we're kind of just waiting and anticipating. By the time of maybe posting this, it might have changed, but it was kind of just out of nowhere where they dropped and announced the release of this watch. It was just like a random day, and they just pushed the press releases out, and everyone's like, where did this come from? But when we did get to investigate it a little bit further, I think most people are collectively saying, hey, this is a nice move by IWC. Case is going to wear a little bit more compact with its lug-to-lug dimension. That's at least the talk, and also some adjustments to the case. Also have 100 meters of water resistance, which is great. Also getting a manufacturer caliber on the inside, sapphire crystal, and pretty much falling in a price range where I would say if you're looking for an everyday do-it-all style watch, also with that pilot aviation type of theme, it's hard to think of any other brand than IWC. Now for our dress watch, I have the Junghans Meister calendar. So this is a watch that I don't even know many people that are even into Junghans understand how cool it is. You're talking about a calendar watch from Junghans that falls in a different vertical than the, of course, conventional max bill that the brand is so synonymous with. But this is one of my favorites from the brand, and I've become increasingly interested in this watch. My favorite is going to be the blue dial version. This one just absolutely pops. Looking at a 40.4 millimeter case, but it is going to wear smaller when on wrist. Just know that the majority of the presence of this watch is going to be all dial. If you're familiar with Junghans, this is to be no surprise, but you're getting a full calendar watch, beautiful moon phase at the 6 o'clock, and pretty reasonable price considering its complication, coming in around $2,300. And to round out our collection, we have the Longines Legend Diver for our dive watch. I was thinking about, okay, you have around $2,500 left over here. What is maybe the best dive watch that you can get for that price range? We already looked at the Aquis. I would look at Longines and specifically at the Legend Diver. I think it's a wonderful watch. It's also, when talking about being different for the price category, there's not many going for that compressor style and doing it well in the segment. Of course, there are some and many that will do it below it, but I think the Legend Diver is one of the best executions of this for its price and below. You're getting an extended power reserve over 70 hours, or roughly 72 hours approximately. A wide variety now of case sizes. You have a 36 millimeter option and a 42 millimeter option, and also different dial variants to choose from as well. We have recently seen the new colorways that were unveiled earlier this year, but if you want to go for the conventional option, you can certainly do that. There's a bronze case option, a lot to choose from. Probably one of the best dive watches under $3,000 if you want to go for something that's a little different, but also very much in alignment with Longines' very storied pedigree and DNA in their archive. But all right, guys, that is my take on looking at 6 different personas, how to build a $10,000 watch collection. If you enjoyed this video and you like this series, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. Thumbs up, that's a great indicator that you want us to keep this series going. We certainly can. 10,000 was certainly a big number. We've been doing this series for a couple of years, so just gradually making our way up. So this was a number that I wanted to get to for quite some time. In terms of which route would you take? If you had a collection, $10,000 to spend, how would you spend it? Was there one of these collections that resonated with you more? I'd love to see comments down below and just get in some conversation with other watch enthusiast friends down there. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the new products that we offer. Definitely check out our article looking at some of the best watches under $10,000. That link will be in the description down below. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.